Tie? Then I question their
Who would like to
abilities.
give the opening prayer this morning?
I didn't even hear a name. Oh.
Who would like to give the opening prayer? Let's see, Mark.
If it doesn't work, then
Cliff, have
Yeah,
never given it.
Hot in here.
Or you can give just have a saying you want
Yeah.
to say. Make a saying.
Okay.
Okay, Mark's volunteering.
I guess so.
Okay, well, if you're going to say a saying, we salute the flag first.
Whatever you'd like to do,
Or
Bill.
if you want a prayer, we'll
Okay,
prayer
okay.
first. Okay, let's have
On
a
the
prayer.
agenda first.
Yes, I just want to say that I want us all to have a nice meeting today and a thoughtful process, and that we come to some conclusions that are good for the district and the employees. So
Amen.
with that, I hope we have a great meeting.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes.
salute pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Georgiana.
Director Dan Whitman.
Here.
Director Ann Rice.
Here.
Director Mark Soler.
Here.
Vice President Phil Jacobson.
Here.
President Botello.
Here. Public participations. Individuals will be given an opportunity to address the board regarding matters not scheduled on the agenda, although the board cannot take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. Opportunity for public comment on agenda items will be provided at the time they are discussed by the board, with comments limited to 5 minutes per agenda item. The first thing on the agenda is a closed session. That's usually held later in the meeting, but we'll go ahead with it now. I understand it's going to be a short meeting. I've been guaranteed of that, right, Kevin?
It's up to you guys.
Point at us. Why? Would you think we'd talk too much, Kevin? Okay, let's go in closed session, and then we'll be back out. We gave direction to legal counsel and management. That's it. We gave direction to legal counsel and management. That's very often how these end, closed sessions. It'd be evident within a week what's happened. So. Okay. Next item is employee retirement program.
Yep, so there was, obviously, on the last one, there was kind of one of them, it was kind of a brief explanation of what their agreed upon procedures were. The other one, we had a little, some issues maybe with some of the wording in their proposal. So I went back to both of them. One of them that gave me the brief has not responded back to me, and that's been kind of almost 2 weeks. The other one was very insightful about maybe expanding the scope, knowing of what we were looking for, and tightening up the scope, which meant the price went up. The other thing, too, is they did bring in the expert in this field, and there was a few other issues that I wasn't aware of that needed to be taken care of through this process, too, to make it extremely tight. One of the issues was that there's some IRS reporting that needs to happen because the monies were put back after a 180-day period. So there's a 180-day grace period that you're allowed to kind of put money back into a retirement account. After that, you have to report to the IRS the errors and omissions, and make sure that that the IRS signs off on it as compliant. So I said definitely include that in the scope. We want to make sure that everything is tight. So that increased the price, and so now their scope is $12,000. I really feel like this is a tight scope of work that will give us a really good report. These guys were one that was on a list that was given to me by the employees themselves. So this is one that they've kind of vetted as one of the ones that they felt was competent in this area, and so that's kind of where we're at.
Kevin, I haven't read this yet, but does this cover all of the points that were in what we agreed to do for
That
them.
we addressed, yeah.
So
This is every one of them.
I sent them that exact letter and said, make sure you hit every one of these points. So they sent a scope of work back that hit every single one of those points.
Okay, you
Plus the
reviewed it and-
additional, plus the additional compliance
Okay,
work.
good,
Yep.
thank you.
I'd like to visit about what I gave everybody a copy of my notes from actually just getting an email from Gene, who's the manager of Biggs Water District. These are both local firms. One's about an hour drive away, and the other one's in Chico. And he said both of these firms would do the kind of work we'd want, forensic investigation work. The reason I lean toward those is that they're local. They'll know more about how we operate and stuff than somebody from out of town. And where is the thing? There was something I caught in here about George Barber being looked into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a specific account that they wanted to make sure that
That
his
George
fees.
Barber saw their account. Why aren't you mentioned? You're part of the management team that did the work.
Well, the thing is all accounts are going to be looked at. So 100% of the accounts are going to be looked at. That was a specific requirement by the committee themselves. So
Yeah.
I wasn't part
That
of
was addressed before here, yeah.
Okay.
I wasn't that. They didn't put me as a list. I don't know. Just a heads up. Heidi is actually our accountant right now for our annual audit. That was brought up early on during this process. The employees didn't feel comfortable with that one, so that one was taken off the list immediately.
Okay.
You know anything about Tenney and Company in
don't.
Yuba City?
I don't. What I did was I took their list and tried to go off of what they had requested in the firms that they were looking for. And the closest firm that they had on their list was Sacramento. Again, they weren't interested in the work. Then we had the Walnut Creek one, which that one's not really doing, is not responding. This one's in Burbank, but with technology today, it's not like they need to be sitting on site.
Yeah. Bill, I have nothing against the possibility of checking with Tenney and Company, except my thought is that we've been dragging this out so long that we need to be getting it done. And if this company had been interested and had put something forward, which is maybe our fault for not contacting somebody locally earlier, but I don't think we can keep putting this off and putting this off. We had promised them a long time ago that we were going to jump on this. And if it were mega thousands, then it's maybe worth waiting. But this is a moderately small amount, and they're all approximately the same price. So,
Well, the only question I have, we're going to have a full board meeting in a few days, and we can still tick the agenda a little bit, is that we make an inquiry to Tenney and Company, and if they're not interested or aren't, don't do the work or whatever, we just go with the company we have the information on from Burbank, which is 7 hours away by car. And
They're not required to be on site.
yes, but in their letter, they mentioned that they would bill us for travel time and so forth, that they had to come here.
yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I would assume they would.
Yeah,
but
come here and look
I'm
at the
not
books
expecting them
themselves.
having to be on site.
Pardon?
I'm not expecting them to have to be on site.
Yeah, it's all paperwork. Yeah.
There's nothing physical they have
Well,
to invest.
I kind of agree with Dan. I think we need to get it done, get it behind us again. And they had the most professional looking presentation when we first looked at them, and they've come back and aligned it with all of the items point for point that we wanted. So unless there's more discussion, I think I'll make a motion that we approve the TWC.
Yeah, I'll second that motion.
More discussion, at least I'd like to, and I want to read from their letters since Cliff hasn't had a chance to read it. If unexpected circumstances, this is on the second page, fees and administrative topics, and we're right in the middle of it. If unexpected circumstances require significant additional time, we will discuss the situation with you and will arrive at new fee estimate before we incur the additional cost. Our invoices for these fees we rendered each month as work progresses and payable upon presentation. Excuse me. In
Incur.
accordance with our firm's policy, work may be suspended if your account becomes 30 days or more overdue and will not resume until your account is paid in full. If we elect to terminate our services for non-payment, our engagement will be deemed to have been completed upon notification of termination. Even if you have not completed our report, you will be obligated to compensate us for all time expended, reimburse our expense. And we redirect to your attention the fact that management has the responsibility for the proper recording of the transactions and accounting records and for preparation of financial statements in conformity with general accepted accounting principles. So basically they're saying Kevin is management and the chief financial officer, they'll rely on his figures.
Just to correct you, we're not. This is boilerplate for any engagements. We're not presenting financial statements, and we're not. They're not reviewing financial statements, so that actually has no bearing on this engagement.
They're all they're going to review is the insurance company's records.
Correct.
You want to ask them if they?
Retirement plans, records.
Yeah. Neil's especially. Do you have any comments about this, Neil? No comment. Are you pleased with this, what we're offering? Okay.
Bill, my thought on this is some of their potentially getting out of it verbiage throughout is if something comes up that we want more than was in the original scope, which would be understandable. I do that in my contracts for people too. I go in to do a kitchen remodel and they say, do you want to do the bathroom while you're at it for the same price? I don't think so. But this is their way of saying if there's something beyond that we request, because they have fulfilled our requests in their presentation to us. So that's my thought. So.
Okay. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion passes 4-1, Georgia. Reservoir B cover, discussion of life expectancy and replacement current reservoir cover, action may be taken. This is something I asked to be on the agenda. And after finding that the one that's in there was replaced one had been there for 20 years, and the new one which it has in the engineering report, is expected 20-year life. And Kevin gave me some figures around $457,000. Maybe you could just say $500,000 for what it cost to replace the cover when I was first on the board, the first year, I think. Any rate, so it's approaching 13 years of service and a 20-year lifespan. And as far as asking staff, they don't see anything wrong with it now, but warned me that somebody can poke a hole in it. But we heard when we replaced the old one, and we had fear of teenagers and other throwing rock on the top. And didn't we buy property or do something for that, lights or fencing or anything?
All the above.
Security perimeter around the top, but that was before this cover was on there. It was with the old cover.
It was with the old cover before you put the new cover on. Thank you.
2005, I was looking through the minutes, and there was a rock that was thrown on the cover that caused quite a bit of damage. That was in 2005, I have to look back at the minutes.
Probably the last big one we had.
The reason I brought up the question or discussion of this is that we're looking at it looks like about a $6 million project in here if you cut out just the tank itself. And I'm going, against, let's say, 500, 600,000 in a couple of years to replace the tank the way it is now. And looking at our finances, I'm saying, well, if we can gain a couple of years on this tank cover, and then if we have to, we can replace it. I'm just looking at where our finances are right now, and I'm going, to do this thing, I know will take a couple of years to put in the big tanks and all that, but it is still a big note. We have to borrow. We have to find the money for it. And as far as I can tell, we wouldn't have any down payment. It would be all financed. So my question on that, and is there any comments from staff at this time?
Directors, yes, you've found the money. It's called SRF. We have a funding agreement. It's as tight as it could be. It's less than 2% money. I mean, that's like free money. Okay, some people have told me, who are professional in the financial industry, to get loans that cheap. So that's not an issue about that money. It's really good money. Delaying the project, staff believes, is not an option. The SRF, the state, although allows floating covers, they're not recommended. They're sanitary hazards. The rock, okay? We're approaching the 20 years. Now, anything can happen at any time, and the worst case is a boil water order. It's a tremendous risk. Boil water order, it's priceless. You can't put a cost on the impact of having a boil water order because you have a tank like this. The fire flow, we just had a wake-up call. We want to improve our fire flow capacity. This reservoir is 3 million gallons. It's got 1 million gallons of unusable storage in it. So we have 2 million. We want to double our fire flow storage. If you have any questions regarding that.
And I'd like to even add to your comments, Jim, that my approval of this project was first for water quality, to get rid of that tank. Fixing the hydraulics and the pump station, that was icing on the cake, and the transmission line. So to me, it's not anything that can wait. It's been put off too long, and we need new tanks there.
It is more than just a tank improvement, but there are a number of other improvements in the entire system. Capacity, flows, everything, and I agree. We're not going to worry so much about whether or not it was necessary or not if it's in place and we really do have an emergency and have to rely on that system. I think it's really important that we get these improvements taken care of.
All
I know
our
money
water goes
is
through
not
that
free.
tank.
I mean, even though 2% money is still
It's
money that we
it's not free money.
I know.
we have to pay it. Understand
like
that's a low interest rate, but we still have to pay it back. So we don't want to spend money foolishly, but I've seen money spent a lot more foolishly since I've been on the board here in a couple instances than what this is, and I think this is money well spent, actually. My opinion on it.
The pump station, we've known for years, needs to be improved for water pressure to the top. Now, the pump station, the only question I have is that we're running a new pipeline down Skyway, and I'm going, we have a pipeline that runs from the water treatment plant around the backside of Magalia. It's been there for a long time, and I don't know why it's not part of this proposal.
So you mean rehabbing that pipeline? Is that what you're saying,
No,
Bill?
I'm not talking about rehabbing it. I'm saying I've never heard about it being in trouble or anything.
It's not necessarily in trouble. It's the fact that you only have one pipe to town. If for some problem you have to have redundant reliability supplies to town, and this project helps do that. And not to mention, it increases, if you have two pipes, then you have an increased supply. When we need it, you now have two sources of supply.
You're absolutely right. If they didn't have a backup generator at the hospital, it would be critical. Not so much at your house, but if we don't have backup redundancy for water, for fire protection, and for our businesses and residents, that could be a major disaster even for a short period of time.
But I'd like to agree with, the 42 has been well maintained by staff over the years, and it's a pretty solid pipe. It could be subject to landslides, which, how vulnerable, but it is a good pipe.
Is it as
Absolutely.
Is it as good as the one that goes across the creek that comes from the pump station from Magalia Reservoir?
That's the one.
Well,
It's 1956 vintage pipe.
yeah.
No, I'm not talking about the pipe from,
By some more years.
I'm not talking about the pipe now that goes around the backside of Magalia. I'm talking about the short piece of pipe.
The creek
that-
crossing.
The creek crossing that has concrete supports without any rebar, and we've tried for 20-some years to get replaced. And I understand that thing is more dangerous than the pipe you're talking about.
It's really a separate issue for the board to address, and it was addressed in the AECOM project. It's at 70% design. Ideally, if I could package a project, I would like to include that pipe in this project. Sammy's would like not to see us compound this project, and I'm sure Kevin would probably agree. Personally, I would like to see that pipe done now. I don't get to. I would make my recommendation, put the pipe in the project.
I just want to say something too about the redundancy that you're speaking to, Jim. It also provides you flexibility. This project provides you flexibility at the treatment plant, and that's a big deal. Believe me, you always want to have as much flexibility, in pumping and piping as you can in your system, and this actually adds to it. I like the whole idea. For me, this project is our top priority right now. For me, it's the top priority.
Bill Taylor put his hand up. Do you want to speak to this?
I was just talking about that pipe. It's in good shape, but it is 1950s vintage steel pipe. In the early 90s, I believe, well, it was in the 90s, it was mortar lined, so they put a concrete lining inside the pipe to try to buy more time out of it. But how old is that?
Yeah.
That brings up a question, Bill. Have we inspected that pipe for a while? I mean, internal inspection.
We did add cathodic protection to it about 2 years ago.
Okay.
Well, it's had cathodic protection all along.
Yeah.
Well,
We put a new cathodic protection system on it.
Okay.
whether it worked or not was another matter.
Okay.
It's brand new though.
Is it sealed or finished with anything, or is it just mortar?
What's that?
Is there a coating or a finish over
On
the?
the inside? No,
Yeah.
it's just mortar.
Just mortar.
Yeah. What they
So that-
call CML.
Does that,
concrete mortar on
does that bleed off at all and add solids to the water in any
Extremely
shape or
little.
form?
I wouldn't say at any level that you would notice.
In there pretty much.
Especially with your water quality.
But to replace that pipe, you would need this alternative pipe to put into place, so that if that pipe ever really needed to be in place, this gives us the opportunity to actually
Exactly. I
replace
mean,
it.
ultimately, what it boils down to is if you got to take one out of service, we still got a way to get water to our customers.
Absolutely.
That's pretty important.
Another question I have to ask is there a wide enough easement that you could run another pipe on the backside of Magalia rather than going down the Skyway?
You know, we took a look at that. That is a side hill easement where that 42-inch line is, and when they built it, they essentially built a construction access road that's pretty difficult, and it's not very wide. It's just wide enough to build that pipe. So you would have to build a road to build the pipe, which would make that cost quite a bit more than going across on the new Skyway.
Because the grade's already in the Skyway.
Because, yeah, the Skyway's already graded, right? You're just putting pipe in road.
Just running parallel pipes right next to each other didn't really seem like, in case something could happen to one pipe, it'll happen to both pipes at the same time.
Two separate routes, in other words.
Yeah, if you had an earthquake or an erosion or something, it's not taking out both of them, yeah.
One thing that I thought also might be beneficial on your tank discussion, when you're looking at the idea of could you just continue to use the existing reservoir besides the issues of water quality and reliability and so forth, it's not comparing $6 million to zero. There is cost of continuing to use that. So we looked at that, and you can see in this table over the 20-year and 50-year net present value what the cost of continuing to replace liners, replace covers, maintain that reservoir is relative to putting a new reservoir in. So it's really not as big of a difference between the new reservoirs and continuing to use the old reservoir in the style that it is now. There is that cost differential is really, in the long run, a net present value of closer to $3 million as far as the comparison there. And we'll get to some of this stuff in a little bit more detail, but I thought that might help with this agenda item.
No, we can go on to the next agenda item because obviously there isn't any support to what I brought up, but I think we're all a little wiser than we were a few minutes ago. At least I am. So, number 7, Reservoir B Replacement Project. Presentation of preliminary design report by Sammy Cater, PE with Waterworks, engineers for the Reservoir B Replacement Project and A-Zone pipeline and pump station design.
So I have some slides that I'll run through just like last time. Please interrupt, ask questions. This doesn't have to be incredibly formal. But we're getting to know each other enough that you're comfortable with that. So I'm just going to talk a little bit today. The last time you saw me, I was here talking about our conceptual design report. We went through that in some detail. And so that's our starting point for preliminary design as we step through the design process on a project like this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just reviewing what we talked about on the conceptual design report. And then I'll talk about the three major job components: the Reservoir B replacement, Zone A transmission main, and Zone A pump station. Talk about cost estimates, and then schedules and constraints. So the first, just a summary. Some of the existing system challenges that we know about, and we're just talking about the finished water hydraulics. So remember, the plant water pumps at the water treatment plant are really what prevent us from using that bottom 1 million gallons of Reservoir B. The existing 42-inch transmission main has no redundancy. Reservoir B has some issues with volume and with water quality we just talked about. Reservoir A relies on a single pump station to feed Zone A, and then the fire storage capacity. So all the issues we were just discussing. So the recommended project components to review are to replace Reservoir B, to add a pump station at the water plant called the Zone A pump station, the ZAPS, if everyone can live with that acronym, and then a transmission main, the Zone A transmission main, to take water down, essentially down New Skyway from the water plant, treated water storage tank, to Reservoir A. And in fact, it's not going to go all the way to Reservoir A. It'll stop at the Skyway and use the existing line that runs up to the reservoir from the Skyway. And then there's some modifications at Pump Station 2 to allow interzone transfer from Zone A to Zone B in the event that pipeline is all that's providing water to the distribution system. So that's a schematic of what the project entails. And again, this is just sort of to get us all back in the mood from the conceptual design. So first, a little discussion about the reservoir replacement. We did some more detailed layout. This looks similar to what we talked about before. 2 tanks on the site, essentially replacing the existing reservoir site. Our geotechnical engineer is out there today drilling holes and investigating the subsurface conditions to let us know some of the engineering parameters we need to be concerned about those tanks. But it's a fairly straightforward site design. We looked at tank materials again. I know in the conceptual design we talked about concrete versus steel. We decided it was worth taking the time to take another look at that for 2 reasons. One, the recent changes in code allowing the use of non-NSF 61 certified concrete for concrete tanks reduced the cost of concrete tanks somewhat. And 2, we hadn't really given bolted steel a good look. So we wanted to look at prestressed concrete, welded steel, and bolted steel. They all have pros and cons. Prestressed concrete has a high capital cost generally and very long service life with very low maintenance. And one other thing about it, though, is they take a long time to build, and that on this project is also a component of the decision-making process. Welded steel tanks tend to have lower capital costs, They require coating when they're initially built, interior and exterior coating, and then they also require recoating on a regular basis, which I believe you're going to be looking at recoating one of your tanks here coming up fairly soon. And those coating costs have been escalating over time, and we're at the point now where they're in the $15 to $20 per square foot. And remember, it's interior and exterior. And when you start talking about these big tanks, 140-foot diameter tanks, and the amount of surface area you have, the cost of recoating can be quite significant. So then they are quicker to build than concrete, not as quick as bolted. So then the other tank material we looked at was bolted steel. And what we looked at is a glass-fused steel, and we actually had a presentation yesterday from one of the glass-fused steel manufacturers talking about their tanks. There's concerns about, so bolted steel tend to be closer in cost to welded steel on the low end. They are very fast to build. They bolt up fairly quickly relative to the other tanks. There are always concerns about joint leakage in the bolt seams. And just there aren't a ton of bolted steel tanks in California. And the reasons for that, some have to do with the acceptance of bolted steel in the sort of water district community in California, and also the amount of marketing effort that's been put into California by the bolted steel tank manufacturers. There are thousands and thousands of bolted steel tanks in similar service throughout the country, in cold climates and hot climates and all over the place, but for some reason it just hadn't really penetrated California, and it's not.
Is that from earthquake concern?
You know, that's something that we initially thought, but really there haven't been failures because of earthquakes or concerns about earthquake design on the bolted steel tanks. There are standards, AWA standards, allowing bolted steel in high seismic zones. You have to design things for seismic reactions. You know, it's possible if you just took a tank that was designed to be installed in North Dakota and plopped it in the middle of California, it would certainly fail under earthquake loads, but when you design it correctly, I think the performance could be expected to be similar to welded steel. So we certainly feel like there's some due diligence to be done on that. So the first step in the tank material assessment is looking at net present value. Capital cost of the welded steel and bolted steel are quite similar, and actually surprisingly similar from my perspective, that the bolted steel quotes that we were getting are relatively close to the quotes we're getting from welded steel manufacturers. The big difference on welded steel is a big part of that cost is in the initial coating, which has to be redone every 15 years. And so as you look at the cost and you go through 20-year, 40-year, 60-year, 80-year, 100-year net present value analysis, the cost of the welded steel tanks, because of the recoating costs, go up over time. The bolted steel tanks, for the purpose of this analysis, we assumed the bolt seams had to be resealed with a high-grade industrial caulking, essentially, every 25 years. That cost is much less than the cost of recoating a tank. And we actually assumed that the tank itself would only last for 60 years, which the bolted steel tank manufacturers would argue till they're blue in the face is incorrect. But there are not a lot of installations that of bolted steel, of glass-fused bolted steel tanks that have been in the ground for that long. And so it's hard to say. So just to be conservative, we said, okay, we assume the whole tank will need to get replaced in 60 years. And then on the concrete tanks, of course, they have a much longer track record, and so we assumed 100-year plus longevity. So, if you start to look at a 100-year window, an 80-year window, the concrete, starts to look good in terms of net present value, but it does carry with it a couple $1 million extra tab at the beginning. Up to the 60-year, it sure looks like bolted steel seems like a good alternative. So that was the assessment that we did. The bolted steel also has that 11-week on-site construction time, which is very attractive because of the fact that this project has to happen with the B reservoir out of service and the system being direct fed from the treated water storage tank and chlorinated in the 42-inch pipeline. So it's It's a way of operating the system that can be done, but it's difficult to sustain operationally, and so we want to keep the duration that we have that site shut down to as minimal as we can. What we ended up concluding on the tank materials, from our perspective, we can design the site and the tank and the structural to accommodate either bolted or welded steel tanks, and it doesn't change our level of effort. So what right now our thought process is that we'll carry that forward and possibly carry it all the way through to bid day, and then have bid prices for both the welded steel and bolted steel so that we know what the real bid prices are. Because sometimes when you're working with manufacturers and they're excited to get their product into the system, they might be optimistic about the cost that they might show up with on bid day. And so I want to be a little careful about that and make sure that we're seeing real numbers, real comparative numbers on the cost of bolted steel and welded steel. And then we can look at that net present value analysis after bid day and make a decision on what material to use. And it doesn't change anything from our perspective. And that way, we can be more certain that we're getting real pricing.
So you decided to eliminate the concrete one just because of the 28-week construction time?
The concrete, yeah, the initial capital cost is higher, and looking out to 60 years, it looks like bolted steel, the net present value of bolted steel is competitive, at least if we see decent bids. And the time frame to construct is concerning. It's feasible, and if the decision was made, hey, we want to make a 100-year decision here and sort out a way to get it done, I think it is possible. But it certainly is a much more comfortable project to do it with an 11 or 20-week construction period versus 28.
The aluminum domed roof.
That's where I was going. That was my question.
We both have the same question.
Yeah.
Is there an advantage or disadvantage to that on the
So
bolted tank?
the aluminum dome roof on the bolted tank,
Require any coating?
I guess advantages, it is corrosion resistant. So uncoated aluminum is resistant to chloride attack, whereas coated steel, you have to maintain the coating to be resistant to chloride attack, and that's the principal corrosion issue in a water tank. The disadvantage tends to basically be aesthetic. So it's a geodesic aluminum dome,
Shiny.
right? And it can be shiny. You can get them to peen the surface with a ball peen machine. I guess not really a guy with a hammer, but so to get it so it doesn't reflect so much, and also have it so it's lower profile. So a geodesic dome. The first proposal we got from the bolted steel tank manufacturer, the dome height was.
Oh my gosh, that rail tank height was like 50 feet.
All right.
Oh, brother.
It was like a 26 foot high sidewall, and then another 30 feet of dome. It was very prominent. Like if you had a soccer park, you could paint a soccer ball on it. But we asked them to requote it with a 1:16 slope or 1:18 slope, a low slope dome that has more beamwork inside, but it gives it that lower profile, so it should be less visible.
On that aluminum roof, I would be curious to know what grade of aluminum they're using, and a lot of chloride ions are more corrosive to aluminum than to oxidizing ferrous metals. So
Yeah, I could get you that information. I don't know off the top of my head.
I would be curious to know what grade of aluminum, and now that's an atmospheric tank, so the water's really never going to contact the dome, right?
Right.
So, but you are going to get off-gassing from chlorine in there, and there's going to be other corrosion issues with the aluminum too, depending on what they use.
Right.
And if it's a
I
steel
have seen
tank,
aluminum.
how are they going to dielectrically connect that to the steel tank?
So they do dielectric connect the whole tank together and then have cathodic protection,
Okay.
passive cathodic protection, magnesium rods.
So there'll be magnesium sacrificial rods
Right.
so there'll be a cost to that and replacement on that.
No, actually, that's included in this cost.
There will be a cost to replace it, correct? And same thing with a welded steel tank. I mean, any steel tank, welded or bolted or anything, we would use cathodic protection.
Okay, I didn't.
And periodically replace
Is that
it.
spelled out anywhere what the cost associated with that and replacement of that rod?
It's
or
not.
rods?
It's not. I could let you know, but in analysis at this level, it's kind of in the noise. We're talking about,
Okay.
not a whole lot.
We're not
of money.
talking major stuff.
No.
Okay.
Do you think there'd be any incentive for the bolted tank manufacturers to really sharpen their pencil for us to get a project in California?
We can
I hope so. I hope to set up a competitive environment where they feel that they would want to do that. There are two major manufacturers. We saw one presentation for one yesterday. They badmouthed the other, which is typical. The other one has done a lot of tanks in Southern California. They're called Aquastore. These guys are Permastore. There's a lot of detailed issues on how to work through that, but that's what we do over the next several months is deal with how to set up a competitive environment and how to make sure that we're getting true pricing and not a lot of bid day finagling.
Is their reasoning for using the aluminum dome roof is that their analysis is less corrosive than ferrous metal?
I think also on that with that span, it's lighter, and so you can do the span with lighter beams and save money on the cost of the roof.
Okay. I was wondering about that.
All the beamwork's all aluminum. The whole thing's pretty light.
So the welded steel tank would be all steel?
Steel roof, right?
Yeah.
With columns, steel columns. So at this point, like I said, we'll carry this thing all the way through into design and have this discussion as we go through about whether we continue. I don't want to set up a situation where where the bolted steel tank, let's say there's two manufacturers, only one shows real interest, and then we only have one bidder on bid day. That's not where you want to be. So we want to at least set up a competitive environment one way or another. And there are a lot of welded steel tank manufacturers, and that may be part of the reason why people don't do as much bolted steel in California, just because there hasn't been the competition. And so anytime you do this, you want to have competition on bid day, not just when they're selling.
Well, tell them both that they're both bad-mouthing each other, and so that they'll just start this.
I would imagine the bolted tank would actually be more resistant to
It would seem like it.
earthquake and movement
That was exactly my thought,
because
too.
it will flex
Yeah,
a lot more than
A
a weld
weld.
would without stressing, I would think.
I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure I could say for sure. You've got points of
reading it. I was
connection
Yeah,
instead of
as long as you have a
seams
bolt
of
strength.
connection. So I think they both can be designed to be appropriately resistant.
Okay.
So that's that.
I'm surprised that just from a totally ignorant carpenter background that they haven't come up with some kind of a rubber membrane that would cover everything up, like
They
a
do
balloon type.
certainly
membrane.
have that. That is an
You could just
option.
collapse
It's not-
it 20 years, put another one in. It'd be cheaper than anyway.
That is used. It's used on digesters, sludge digesters, and things like that, so that the gas can sort of expand the rubber and let it drop and everything else.
We're going to have you make some wooden tanks
Not typically
for us.
used on water.
Seems
tanks.
like it'd be less expensive.
We could have you make some wooden tanks for us, Dan.
That's a good idea.
There's an example
Big ol' hot
right down
tubs.
in front of you, I think.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So the cost estimate is basically the same as it was in the preliminary or the conceptual design report. And I want to just point out as we go through these cost estimates, we have some major categories: site work, structural, piping, valves, electrical, and then we have the contingencies, bonds and insurance, taxes, profit. Right now we have a 15% design contingency, and what that means is there's things we don't know yet. For instance, what we're going to find out with our geotechnical borings and what subsurface, subsoil conditioning might be necessary or things like that we want to make sure we've budgeted for. And then we come up with what we think the bid would be, which is the $6 million, the $5.96 million. And then we also, in these estimates, use a 5% construction contingency so that when the project is budgeted, there's money to accommodate unforeseen site conditions during construction. And you'll see that same methodology in all the estimating. So we're a skosh over where we were in the, I guess 160 grand isn't a skosh if it's your money, but over where we were in the conceptual design report, but the same basic cost. The transmission main, again, just to remind, we're starting from the treated water storage tank and going down New Skyway. Just to overview the alignment, We're going from elevation 2195 to 2300, it's 7,200 feet of alignment overall. Down Pine Needle to New Skyway to Skyway. District property or public right-of-way, Butte County. So we met with Butte County yesterday to talk about this right-of-way. We contacted them and approached them about an encroachment permit and getting started on the discussion of what the requirements will be for the encroachment permit, and found out that Butte County does not own the right-of-way for New Skyway. So the story, if you'll indulge me for a couple of minutes, it's interesting. There was that the right-of-way agent who Union Pacific hired in the early part of the century to come out
Still
and
the
get
old
the
railroad.
right-of-way
Yep.
for them, got the right-of-way under the right-of-way agent's name, and then sold Union Pacific an easement onto that right-of-way for the railroad. So when Butte County went to build New Skyway in the mid-'80s, they went to Union Pacific, asked for to get right-of-way to build the road. Union Pacific said, we don't have it, we can give you authority to construct. So they got authority to constructed the road, and that's where it ended. So they are now rekindling I'm sure none of the people at Butte County now were there when that happened. So the folks that are there now, we met with them yesterday, Tom Fossum and the rest of the folks there. They are rekindling their efforts to purchase and have the right-of-way so that they can grant an encroachment permit to this project to allow it to go forward. We'll keep you posted on that process.
Who's going to bear the cost of that? Butte County is.
Yeah, Tom said, we got to get this sorted. This should be, fixed.
Bigger issue for
It's
them.
in their best interest for long-term use of the road,
Yeah.
I think.
One would think.
So the bigger question that from our perspective is time, because in order to acquire funding for this project, most funding agencies that might be giving you a grant or a loan are going to want to know that you have the right to build the project, and they're going to want to see that is in place. And so we talked about that yesterday, and I think part of this is going to be us sort of gently helping the process move forward so that we can have that in a timely manner when you're trying to acquire funding for this project. Because we don't want to, right now we can't go out and do geotechnical drilling on the road because there's no way to grant our driller the access to drill holes. So we're working to try to find if there's some way we can do that.
Any guesstimate on how long that's going to take?
I don't have. We just met yesterday, and they haven't even started discussions with Union Pacific, so I don't know right now.
We can put off the whole project.
I can tell you that it could take potentially a long time. And the reason for that is because the town has encountered this with the Memorial Trailway, now the Yellowstone Kelly Trailway. The town kept having, every time we wanted to cross that with the road and clean up the roads and so on, same issue. And they fought for years. Still major portions of that Yellowstone Trail belong to individuals.
So I think this is one individual, which makes it, I think, easier.
I'm sorry?
I think this was one individual who owns that entire right-of-way, so I think that
Right.
makes it easier. So,
Hopefully.
And I think they were already in the process of negotiating with that individual's heirs, and they just have to rekindle that effort. And so hopefully it moves forward. I mean, I'm not, at this point, we'll just start, helping them get started and keep tabs on it and keep you posted. So the good news out of that meeting with Butte County, we talked about requirements, potential requirements for an encroachment permit. They were all very reasonable. Butte County right now has programmed to repave, to do an overlay on New Skyway. Right now is programmed for 2018. We said, well, if this project goes in 2019, can we postpone? They said we would postpone that to 2019, and that would save PID the cost of the lane overlay.
Wow. Great.
And also make the construction project a bit simpler in terms of right now we tried to get in and out of the roadway to save the number of linear feet of lane overlay that had to be done. So the pipeline kind of jogs a bit, goes out into the shoulder, back on the road, out into the shoulder, back on the road, just to save paving. Mm-hmm. If that's off the table because the paving's already happening anyway, then the alignment gets much simpler. It's right down the middle of a lane, which also will save construction cost and time.
Can't the county take that property right?
I'm not a right-of-way agent. I'm sure there are things they can do to condemn and so forth, but that's...
Do we know who the entity is that owns that?
I don't. Again, this was just yesterday, and I wanted to give them a little bit of, time for them to move forward with their process. And they basically said that they're going to take care of it, and then and then they granted an encroachment permit to PID for the pipeline. So I don't think, myself or staff are going to let this sit for a long time, but we got to give them a little room to work.
Sam, I got some questions about Pine Needle Drive. Is that a private road?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. My thinking was, the few times I've been down to the treatment plant, that road could be improved. And if we're tearing that road up to put the pipeline in, I don't know what our plans would be to repave or what have you, but it seems like it's kind of in poor shape, I guess. Correct me if I'm wrong.
I believe it's a county road.
It's a county road? Okay. So I was thinking that since we're going to be going through that, that road, if indeed we will be right down the middle, I don't know if we're going to be on the side of the road or what have you, but that road could be improved maybe in this project, possibly, just because.
We can certainly look at it and see how it fits into the
for another
cost model.
$300,000 piece of cake.
Well, that's probably right, Dan. It's probably true, but it's pretty critical. That roadway is pretty critical to the treatment plant.
Sure.
I mean, in emergencies, you've got chemical deliveries coming through there.
Especially,
let's say, if we do have a construction project down the road at the treatment plant, just a few times, like I say, I've been on that road. It seems a little rough to me. So, just throwing that out there.
Yep, no, certainly worth considering.
If you think that's rough, try Dean Road.
We're talking about that too. In tearing up over an acre of soil, we get into storm mitigation and everything. Bill, didn't you mention something about the rock there or something had asbestos in it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So is that an abatement issue
soapstone.
you guys have looked at that is going to be covered if you have to address that?
I can show you on the,
It's not a problem. You just have to, if you know it's there, you handle it. You just keep it down.
Yeah, I mean, we would get that eventually when our geotech gets access to the alignment. We would understand the extent of it's serpentine rock. I assume is what you're talking about,
yes.
And then we just have to let the contractor know that.
Propose the pipe right now.
No, you're not going to hit it on Skyway.
No, but I mean after you come down
With the tanks.
Or you're going to set tanks and everything. That's good.
and so forth. I think there's very little of it.
Very
left,
little.
and it sort of disappears in there. I've walked it several times. And the serpentine seems to stop and goes into volcanic rock, which serpentine is very soft, but it's also got the asbestos in it.
Right.
And volcanic rock isn't. It's some places pretty solid, so you may end up there. But you're going to survey it anyhow, aren't you?
Yeah, and if there is serpentine rock, there are mitigation measures during construction about water, keeping water on
Keep it wet.
on the rock, keeping dust
All you gotta
control, significant dust
It's not a
control.
big issue from changing the cost of the project.
In the areas where there's serpentine, it would impact the cost, but it's not.
It's
Not
negligible.
going to change the overall.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons why we have those design contingencies in there. As we
I've
go
still
through
got copies
and
of the
construction
fact sheets
contingencies.
at home, which I brought out when we were talking about the other one, which was going to be right into serpentine.
As far as existing utilities, there are some pipes from Delaware Water Company. There are also some crossing culverts from the county. Nothing could be too concerned about, especially with the pressure pipeline, 16-inch, easy to get around them.
Make sure you don't put any saddle clamps on ours.
I think you got gas lines and a few things, but it's not too bad.
Right now we're looking at, and we'll talk a little bit more about pipe type, but at 16-inch, either poly-wrapped ductile iron pipe, may or may not need to be poly-wrapped depending on the corrosivity of the soils, but for now we're assuming it would be poly-wrapped or PVC C900. We did surge analysis work as part of the preliminary design report. There's some surge report in the back. What this is you're operating this 1.5 miles of pipeline. You've got pumps running. You're pushing flow down the pipeline. Suddenly there's a power outage. The pumps stop, and that big column of water still wants to move.
The big hammer.
And so we got to make sure that we deal with that water hammer issue, that we have some way of dealing with it. There were two alternatives. There's a surge analysis company we use called ZZ Technologies, who does surge analysis all over the western U.S. We've worked with them a ton before. They came back with two possible solutions. One is to put anti-surge valves along the pipeline. There would be 5 of them. So they look kind of like air relief valves to allow, as that water column is moving, to allow air to be pulled in and pushed out to mitigate that hammer. The other option is to put a surge tank at the pump station at the water plant to do the same thing, to allow water to come in and the surge to come back in a surge tank to absorb it. We looked at the cost of both. The surge valves are cheaper than the surge tank. We talked about preference of which way to go. The surge valves are obviously out in the public, so they're like the air valves. They'll be in those little above grade cans, and they require maintenance. So you have to go check them periodically and so forth. The surge tank has a compressor, requires maintenance, and there's a tank at the water plant, so that has some advantage. It's all inside the fence. It is more expensive, and there are always safety concerns with surge tanks because you have to make sure and watch the corrosion of the tank, and if you have a corroded tank, they can explode and be deadly. So, because of the cost and safety concerns, the alternative of using the surge valves along the alignment was selected.
Which one is best protecting the circuits?
Equal.
No difference.
No difference. They're both designed. They're both designed.
One large surge tank at the plant will give you the same protection on hammering at the far end of the line as individual
air and vacuum valves,
right?
Air and vacuum valves, yes.
Air vacuums, okay. No difference in either one.
They'll both give you adequate protection to not go outside of the parameters of the pipeline readings.
Because I could see it being less on one end and more on the other with one surge tank at the far end.
Yeah, I didn't include the calcs because they were hundreds of pages long, but I'd be happy to send them to you. You can see in the calcs what the surge pattern looks like, and with each option. So he ran each option through his model, and they both
I think the
patterns are a bit
oscillation's
different.
less, but the weight of the water at the far end is going to be more, and so I would imagine that.
Yeah.
The water is actually more excessive at the pump station because that's a downhill section of pipeline. So that's where the surge tank would be located. So if you put
You can kind of picture that. You can picture that column of water at pump stop. The column goes like this towards the A zone reservoir,
Right.
and then it comes back like that, right?
Right.
So you kind of have this big, either have this big shock absorber at one end, the
Right.
surge tank,
Ones all along the
or instead of that, you have a bunch of five
Air gaps.
and air and vac valves that keep the column from going so far,
Right.
and keep that back surge from going up so far.
That's what
Essentially.
Is that also, that's what staff recommends as well?
Pipe material selection, anything else on surge, or we're good? Okay, pipe material selection, we're essentially going to take polywrap ductile iron pipe and PVC C900 all the way through to bid day. Similar to the tanks, we've done this on a number of projects. The two materials vary in cost with two different commodity markets. So ductile iron varies with steel, PVC varies with oil. Those two commodities go up and down based on world events that we have no control over. So on any given day, one is more expensive or less expensive than the other. In terms of performance and long-term performance, they're quite similar. We do not have significant thrust restraint issues on this pipeline that can't be accommodated. Sometimes the thrust restraint would drive you towards ductile iron a bit. So right now we would recommend continuing with either ductile iron pipe or PVC C900 all the way through to bid, and then see which one bids lower. We do not recommend using HDPE because of some chlorine degradation issues that HDPE has seen in water service.
Yeah.
We use it a lot in sewers, but
If I can, this is a landowning software thing. Pine Needle Drive is owned by Del Oro Water Company and by the County of Butte.
Thank you, Bill.
Most of it's Del Oro.
nice. On your smartphone.
High density.
No,
It's quick.
Yeah.
All right.
roadway, it says,
Thank you.
the railroad company, and then down below it says somebody, Magi, somebody, M-A-G-I. Magi.
Yeah.
No. This part of it is privately held, but it looks like both of it privately held. I don't know which would be harder to deal with, a person or a railroad company.
Traffic control on Pine Needle and on Skyway past the new Skyway alignment are fairly straightforward in terms of just having temporary lane closures and so forth. Traffic control on new Skyway is the big question on this project, from Pine Needle to the intersection of Pence. And the discussion yesterday with Butte County was that section of road sees 15,000 cars per day, 10 to 15% of which are heavy trucks. Because we were discussing with them the idea that what we might do is take one lane of New Skyway and divert southbound traffic to the other lane, to the northbound lane of New Skyway, and then divert northbound traffic to the old Skyway alignment. They were not happy with that approach because of the wear and tear on old Skyway that would happen over the course of 4 to 6 weeks of construction period with that amount of traffic. What they preferred was a complete shutdown of New Skyway, complete diversion of traffic to old Skyway, but work at night when the traffic counts are lower and the
Sure, yeah, I do. Trip
traffic
count.
counts are lower.
Yeah, trip count's a lot
The truck
less.
traffic's lower. So from a construction cost standpoint, not a huge impact. When you're working long-term nights, the labor costs you basically the same. You got to pay for lights. Some of the materials might cost you a bit more if you get materials delivered like concrete or asphalt. But not a huge impact from a construction cost standpoint, especially because if New Skyway is completely shut down, it allows very efficient use of trucks, dump trucks. The contractor can just go crazy from the hours of 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. and then has to get out of the road. So I think that's probably the way this thing is headed, to be a night job.
Should get done quicker. My experience is night crew works a lot harder.
I don't know. I work better at night sometimes.
Amy, that brings up a question about, are you going to break this contract up to bid, like the pipeline section versus the
I think
section or the...
At this point, we'll proceed to allow any packaging that you want to package.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of that's going to have to do with funding and funding availability and so forth. And then we'll have some discussions as we get closer to bid day or maybe as we get through the 60%, we're getting to 90% and talking about bid packaging. Do you want to advertise a single, $11 million job, and that attracts a certain type of contractor, or do you want to advertise 3 smaller jobs and attract certain types of contractors? So I think there's certainly some
pipeline guys and there's tank guys.
I'm just curious, where did you get the numbers of vehicles
from Butte County yesterday. They just said,
Yeah, you can get,
they've done traffic counts and it's 15,000 per day.
That's going across the
New Skyway.
from Magalia on down. So that's not even Paradise residents. That's just
They said this section of New Skyway, so from Pine Needle to Pence.
it's an all day. So that's both directions.
I didn't get a lot of
right?
details. They just said that was the traffic.
So that's 7,500 vehicles going to work and coming back.
I imagine.
Okay. Wow.
And you can see in the dig outs that stretch of road could use an overlay.
Well, that's good to know for our future dealings with trying to widen that road across the Magalia.
Just real quick on Pump Station 2, this is where we're talking about being able to feed from Zone A down into Zone B. There's an existing pump that pumps from Zone B into Zone A. And essentially what we're going to do is, in the mechanical piping at that pump, add a second valve that allows flow to go the other direction from Zone A back into Zone B. The Zone A transmission main preliminary cost estimate, right where we are from the conceptual design report at $3.1 million probable construction cost. Zone A pump station, we took a look at some different configurations, two duty pumps and one standby, or 3 duty pumps and 1 standby. The 3+1, 3 duty and 1 standby, would not have variable frequency drives, so they'd be single speed pumps. The 2+1 would have variable frequency drives. So we looked at a bunch of different comparisons between the two approaches and recommend a 3+1 vertical turbine pump station, single speed pump motors. It's lower horsepower per pump, no VFDs, simpler operation, saves capital costs, saves maintenance costs, and it's easier on the generator also when each pump starts up if we were doing it under generator load.
You didn't happen to look at, mixing the two, in other words, having a VFD pump maybe as the primary pump, just so you can.
Yeah, we're filling a tank, so the need to really vary that flow and get, if we were trying to, maintain a level somewhere or maintain a pressure in a zone, then that's when that jockey pump that's a variable drive that kind of holds the pressure or holds a level comes in handy. But in this case, it's essentially just filling the A-zone tank.
Just go
till it's full, stop when it's full.
Yeah.
But the VFDs
Kinda overkill.
slowly being able to start or stop lessen the requirement for the shock absorption?
So there's two parts to that. One, no, because a power outage doesn't allow that ramp down.
Okay.
So the shock absorption is really about a power outage that suddenly stops the pump. The other side of it is, a good point is that during starting a pump, the inrush current to the pump is quite high, 6 times the running current, right? Mm-hmm. And so VFDs do allow you to slowly start a pump and avoid that load on your generator and on your electrical systems and so forth. Mm-hmm. When I say single speed, they will have soft starts, which is a solid state starter that ramps up. So just on the start, they will ramp up they don't just suddenly come on like a switch, they ramp up to their full speed.
And when the tank is full and they shut off, that's when they're going to slam. And
They also ramp down. The only time they'll slam is if the power goes
so
out.
they get the soft start and stop without the VFD.
Right.
Okay, that's answers my question. Thank you.
You said the only time they slam is when the power goes out?
Right.
How often is that?
Very seldom.
We got that big generator.
Problem is, you got 7,000 feet of pipe you invested in the ground, and the one time it happens and it blows pipe out of the ground, it'll pay 10 times for those 4 valves that are along.
Bill, there's a delay between the startup of the generator and a power outage. There's usually
There's always a
15
delay.
seconds or
Yeah.
you can tell me how many seconds it takes to come up to speed and get online, but
It's
it's
usually minutes, at least. Yeah, it's
ours. We had one to 15, 20 seconds. We were up.
Well, yeah, but the soft start and stop, that's a big deal because that's every day, all day long.
that's
So
every day.
That
Keeps that long-term wear and tear of any kind of
Exactly,
hammer on
that
your
makes a
pipeline.
big difference.
But the idea of having a single excursion of pressure on your pipeline and actually blowing a joint apart during a power outage
Yeah.
is
Well,
generally
power outage
worth the small investment of the valves along the
We
pipeline.
probably have 10 to the one they might have in Chico because of our trees.
Yeah.
It's no different than what we have at pump stations do right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have that same problem. When the power goes out, we'll give a surge.
Yeah.
Okay, I just,
Cross your fingers.
when you said that, I'm going, oh, you understand about our power outages up here.
Generally, everywhere that we work that's rural has power
I have a
outage
generator
problems.
out my back door, and it
Yeah.
gets used 2 or 3 times a year.
Okay.
It seems like whenever I use mine, the power comes back on because I don't have it hooked up permanent. I carry mine out of my garage. I get to unplug the fridge.
And here it
plugged in,
comes.
and as soon as I then power comes. Anyway, Zone 8 pump station. The location here, we're at the water plant. This is the main operations building. This is the existing treated water storage tank. It'll be located right between the treated water storage tank and the existing chemical feed facility with this access road going right between them. So here's a closer view of the treated water storage tank. This is the access road, and you can see it was a 4-pump arrangement with a flow meter. And then this is a pressure relief valve that goes back into the treated water storage tank in the event that there's a pump starting against a closed downstream valve so we don't overpressurize anything. And then this line here refeeds the plant water system from zone A, basically. So plant water will be at A zone pressure.
Is that after chlorination?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is at the last channel of the treated water storage tank right here, and we're pulling out of that last channel, going into the pump can, and then pulling out of the pump can, going into the discharge. And this is what that excavation is going to look like, and the construction of the building. Just in a preliminary. Preliminary cost estimate, again, we're pretty much at the same spot we were at the conceptual design report, $1.6 million. Total costs, we're right in the same spot almost, between 10.5 million on bid day, 11 million by the time the project is done. We'd estimated 10.9 at this conceptual report. Still fairly comfortable that that's a good number. Construction schedule. Here we are on November 8th. We're on the second line here, board review and approval of the preliminary design. We would continue with the 60% design over the next couple of months, deliver 60% design in January, February, 90% design, come back with a 90% design in April, and then be completed with bid documents in May of 2018. Then we've given in this schedule a year to complete all easements and final CEQA. So that's where, and also project funding is the next line. So essentially we're going to get to a point where we have a project, because many of the funding agencies want to see a shovel-ready project. I think that came up. So we'll have a project. As long as we have an easement, we'll have a shovel-ready project, and then funding can be acquired into 2018. Our intent would be to bid the project towards the end of 2018, and then the beginning of 2019 would be the contractor getting their submittals in, getting equipment ordered, manufacturing going on things and so forth, and then construction in the summer of 2019 for the transmission main and pump station, and then in the winter of 2019 into the spring of 2020 for the tanks, and project completion in 2020. So as you go down the page on that schedule, those dates get far more uncertain, obviously.
Sure.
But we got to take some educated guesses now. That's all I have for today. If there's any other questions or comments or discussion, I'm happy to.
Well, my big concern is the amount of money it sounds like we're already invested and are going to invest and be on the hook for if this easement issue isn't resolved.
I don't
It's kind
think
of
so.
a flag for me all of a sudden.
I don't think so.
No?
I don't, but I could be wrong.
Is there a window where that low interest free money, Jim, goes away?
Not really, 3 years, they really get, I've had projects with SRF, they've extended it for 4 years.
Okay,
Because we kept having issues.
okay. So
But
there's
they're
not
really.
so if we don't meet these deadlines because of
Easement problems, yeah.
easement issues,
They're not deadlines, it's such projected dates.
well, but complete all easements and final CEQA, and that was my question. Do we have a time frame where if we don't get that done, they don't say we get the money committed to us?
I don't know.
Yeah, the only deadlines that are on there are some deadlines in the SRF funding that will meet with the design. So you have some design deadlines between now and next May. And essentially what this schedule tells you is we get through next May, you've invested the money to pay for the design. And then at that point, this easement issue, has to get resolved before you put this thing out to bid and invest the money to build it. So I think in the meantime, and remember that's now 6 or 8 months from now. In the next few months, we should have a more clear idea of where this easement issue is going and so forth. I think Butte County seemed to intend to talk to Union Pacific sometime in the next few weeks. So. Hopefully that happens, and we can kind of keep tabs on it. I tend to sort of stay in contact with Tom Fossum and just say, hey, how's it going?
I thought Union Pacific didn't own that.
But they're the first step because they have they do have an easement there,
They have the existing easement.
and they also have the information about who owns the
gave it
right
to
of way.
But if
that
they have
got
the
the easement
existing
from.
easement, is there some way that we can piggyback on that and not have to go to the
Could be, and that's why I think they're talking to them first.
Okay.
So, and we talked about us going to Union Pacific, but I think it's.
No,
First step needs to be Butte County.
It's their
so we don't get into
responsibility.
That's their problem.
The real way this should end up is that Butte County owns a right-of-way and we get an encroachment permit on their right-of-way.
Well, you can talk to them about what's the name of that road? Pine Needle?
Pine Needle.
Pine Needle Road, they own a good portion of that. It's a good place where you're going to have to get an easement there or something.
Right.
So you can start talking to them that way.
And you were going to say
Or
something?
they might be able to just write you one on something.
They'll probably be able to write an encroachment permit through Pine Needle, no problem, because they own it in fee.
I don't know about Del Oro. I think we're on good terms with them, but I don't know.
The only thing I was going to say is with this, I just made a note to contact several of the soups contact supervisors, first name basis with all but one. I'll call 4 of them as soon as I can, because probably it's low priority with them. But if we can contact them and say, please bump this for our sake, they can do that. So
I would just suggest waiting a bit, because I didn't get the sense it was low priority. I felt like they were fairly like, and so, you know, if they move forward on it, maybe if we don't see movement in a few months, then maybe, you know, try to put some political pressure. But just from my perspective, of course, it's your choice, but from my perspective, my impression coming out of the meeting, and Neil, Bill, you guys were there too, was that they intended to proceed.
Okay. It wasn't political pressure as much as it was, here's what's happening, please, you know, check with your department heads and make sure it's proceeding. Yeah.
Obviously, your call. I thought I'd tell you the nature of the meeting yesterday, it seemed like this was
something they were pursuing.
Something they were concerned about that probably happened before they were ever even employees of Butte County.
Okay.
and they just are now being made aware of it and saying, well, we got to fix this. So
I will take it off my list for the time being.
I noticed that in your report you did touch on the building materials for the pump station.
Yeah.
Didn't do it in this oral report, so.
I can certainly
I
discuss
think
it.
it's on page 18, the cost between, we were just basically the same, the concrete block or the steel.
Right.
But, so I'm assuming we're going to go for something that kind of matches existing, like the picture?
That's the plan. It'll look a lot like the raw water pump station down below. That single pitch roof.
Yeah.
This is a very similar station. It'll be a mini version of that, because those are bigger pumps.
Okay.
Block building, same fluted block on the bottom, precision block on the top, and then a blue roof, 6 and 12 pitch, and very similar.
Thank
Skylights.
And I agree totally with the analysis in regards to longevity and ease of working with. You got to hang pipes on the wall, anything. It's a whole lot easier.
For
So.
a building that small,
Yep,
it
right.
tends to be kind of a wash. As the building get bigger, the steel buildings tend to get more less expensive.
Less expensive. Yeah. Whole lot of what we're doing these days is steel because of that. But from your perspective of this, it works better to go block.
The building's, you know, not big.
Yeah, it's tiny.
It's a pretty small building. It's not a lot of block work.
And that pump station's far enough away from the ops building, we don't have to worry about footings or anything on the ops building.
No.
Yeah, the bigger concern is the footing on the treated water storage tank.
Okay.
So if you look at that figure, you can see we've got to extend the footing with some controlled low strength material, or controlled density fill is what it's also called, so that this zone of influence of that footing pressure there gets below the treated water storage tank, so that it's not impacting the sidewall load.
Right, 45-degree angle, industry standard. You can handle it.
So that's more concerning. The footings for the other building are quite a bit further away the other direction. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Is there any more questions? Anything on this?
So our next steps, we're going to continue with the 60% design, produce a set of 60% plans and specs, review with staff, and we're happy to come back and talk about those if you'd like.
Did we,
We need a motion now.
did we didn't do anything on item 6 to
No, I just said
cover?
we'll go on because there was no support for it.
Information.
It's just information on it.
Okay.
So this one we need, it says here, action may be taken to provide policy direction to move forward with final design.
So moved. We move forward in regards to the final design.
And I just want to make sure that this doesn't lock us into any tank material, pipe material, except for we still have time.
We are choosing to do either bolted or welded steel.
Right, those two.
We are going away from concrete
Right.
with the
Okay.
design. If we decided later to switch to concrete, we'd have to do another design effort, and I'd be,
I just meant between the two, the fused, the glass, or the
we'll design
welded.
those simultaneously.
We're not locked into either
Like
one
we
yet.
said, we're looking
Yes.
at both those side by side for bids and see which
Yep.
one's the best bid.
Yeah.
The other thing is we're going to continue with some due diligence in talking to existing owners who have them. We do some work in Southern California with Elsinore Valley Municipal Water, EVMWD,
Anyway,
District.
Elsinore.
Thank you, Elsinore Valley Municipal Water District, and they have 6 of them, I think. And so I have a call into their engineering department.
Just a minute. We need a second on the
Sorry.
motion.
I'll second that.
Everybody say second. You
I'll second that motion.
We got
Is there
2
a
seconds
third?
now.
Do you have a fourth?
Yeah, it's seconded over and over. Okay, go ahead, keep going.
So we've got some due diligence to do, and talking to the other, both the tank man, I mean, there's a lot of work to do in the design.
Did the refinery industry use those tanks too? Is it?
I think they do. I know agriculture used them. They were talking yesterday about the origin of these tanks is in grain silos.
Different infusion, probably.
But
Okay, and we're going with your, if we approve this going forward, we're going with your recommendation on the individual valves instead of the surge tank, as well as the non-VFD motors.
right, basically all the contents of
Pretty
the
much as presented,
As
yeah.
presented,
Right.
yeah,
Okay, I have no more questions.
I'm good.
You called for the question? You said you had no more
I
questions.
say I have no more questions. I can call for the question.
For tonight.
Call for the question.
Or we could just vote on it.
Yeah, we're
Okay,
good.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, Georgiana. It isn't on the schedule.
Thank you, Sammy.
I think
Thank you,
normally we
Sammy.
have a moment for director's comments. If anybody wants to make a comment about anything, we're going to have a meeting the 14th, a regular board meeting, so if it's there, if somebody wants to make a comment.
Well, I'd like to make a comment that our press representative is better looking than usual.
And you've had good training by the board and everything.
Yeah, that's really,
And so,
shame on
Thank you
you.
for coming.
Sarah, we thank you for coming, and maybe you should tell us what happened to our previous. Yeah, where did he go?
Eli went to Costa Rica to, well, I don't know if he's left yet, but he's going there to teach English. I'm scared him away.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, it was very, very well done.
Yeah, thanks, Sammy.
And thank you to staff.
I like the way you make it thorough, but yet succinct, because I honestly thought we'd be here until 4 o'clock, so, thank you.
you guys also have to realize that this is not us doing work and presenting it and then we have to talk to you. These are collaborative efforts. It's self-design and this preliminary design reporting. There's a
Sure.
lot of involvement from staff in the development of this.
Good.
Analyses, they put in a lot of work on this and we appreciate our relationship with them.
Is that why you're pointing at Bill Baker and Neil back
Yeah,
there?
all the time.
No finger pointing back there.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks you guys.
Now there's some of this stuff too.
Okay.
We adjourn?
Are we adjourned?
Well, make a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
Second.
We're out of
All in
here.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
I've got a question.